Now, coming to this week, we're going to talk about money as we do so often. Sport becomes such a big part of your life. And if you get so attached to it, the moment it goes away from you, your mental state is not normal. Like, because you are trying to fill in that gap and fill in that void and you have nothing to do.
Allen Iverson, like the answer, okay, but he didn't seem to have the answer for financial troubles.
I was just looking at the numbers for Tyson. $30 million per fight he was earning. $30 million. How do you drain all of that money no matter what? I mean, you can always spend all your money, but it's so hard.
The Italian government said that they apparently are owed 32 million pounds. If anyone wants it in dollars, it's close to $50 million.
54 or something, yep.
So Maradona refused to pay this amount. Let's Shaquille O'Neal is probably one of those guys who you would not know is actually like so good with his money, right?
Conor McGregor. My God, whatever said and done, that guy knows how to make money. Hey everyone, welcome back to an all new episode of All About Sports, the podcast, a weekly sports podcast by the fans, for the fans. Joining me today is Aniket.
Hello.
And I am your host, Mazhar. And both of us will be deep diving into something that is very intriguing for us. And we were thinking of doing a while back. But of course, finally, we managed to get to it. But before we dive into this week's episode, let me give you a quick reminder of what we did last week. So last week, we discussed golf. It was our first time doing golf exclusively. And we discussed the entire controversy with Phil Mickelson and his comments about Saudi Arabia. And then we also discussed the rival competition of the PGA Tour, which is the Live Golf Invitational. So you can check out that episode. Lots to learn, lots to know about. And we'd love to know your thoughts and comments on it as well. Now, coming to this week, we're going to talk about money as we do so often, but in a slightly different context here. So we all know that sports persons typically make a lot of money, but also historically, we have seen so many of athletes going bankrupt. So that's what we'll be discussing. Some stories or some of the most infamous cases where athletes who have made it to the top of their level and made a lot of money have managed to somehow lose it all. So we'll cover that. And also on the flip side, cover some stories about those who have been successful in the sports industry. And the reason why we thought of this was, of course, with the recent news a few months back around Boris Becker, a former Wimbledon champion in tennis. He has been jailed for 2.5 years because he hid 2.5 million pounds worth of assets and loans in order to avoid paying debts. So he was charged under the Insolvency Act. And that is because there was an unpaid loan on 3 million pounds of his luxury estate in Mallorca in Spain. So Gui, I'm going to come to you. That's one case, and that's the most recent case. And this is a very noteworthy personality we're talking about. Take us through some of the other cases that have really struck you, not by surprise, but like something that really stands out and you always remember when someone brings up this topic.
So one guy I could most certainly like say that I was surprised about. Okay. Again, if you were not surprised, then you knew something more than I did, right? So it's basically Allen Iverson, like the answer, okay, but he didn't seem to have the answer for financial troubles. I mean, I'll just read this out for you, okay? This man had monthly expenses including 10,000 on clothes, 10 on restaurants, and 10,000 on groceries. Okay, fine. Do as you please for yourself. But apparently, the biggest reason for his financial troubles was that he had an entourage of almost 50 people. This is not an entourage, excuse me. Like when I see you have to take care of your friends and family who backed you up in initial days of a sporting career as you were a child, God knows what not, right? Fine, fair enough. Like 10 people, 15. what is this 50 people entourage that you have? Okay. And even if you consider NBA as one of the sports where you have an actual playing lifespan, you can play like 10 plus seasons. Unlike the NFL, where like playing 10 plus seasons is it's a pretty big deal unless you're not like quarterback material or whatever it is, right? Like unless you are one of the best, you don't survive. Like the average is very low as compared to the NBA. And this guy is not, I mean, not a squad player. Okay, not a squad player by any means. But just hear his deal. Okay, I don't know, I think he had a Reebok deal in 2001, which which gave him access to a trust. Like he gets a trust of like some 30 million, but accessible like 30 years later. All right. But also it had a payment structure of $800,000 a year. And how do you manage to run out of that kind of money? And finally, like the nail in the coffin was like when everyone actually came to know was when the courts ordered him to pay a jeweler some $900,000. All right. And he said he does not have the cash for it. That is when it was out in the open that this gentleman does not have the financial resources you would expect him to have. And this is coming from like cultural icon of basketball, right? Probably dragged a team which nobody was expecting to the NBA finals, right? And to be honest, like I know there are going to be a lot of names which come up on this list, but with AI's Reebok contract, all right, which made headlines way back when, right? That this guy should be rolling in cash. Like, to be honest, I think he'll pay a lot of other people on this list. So that was one. I'm going to put you on the spot for your favorite one, and then we can, go down the list.
I hate the fact that you had to say favorite one because this is not a proud moment for anyone. It hurts us. Like
True,
this,
true.
the
I
amount of
should.
money drain is crazy. And Gui, I love that you brought up that Reebok deal because I3 was so iconic, which is what the brand they created for him. That was the first piece of basketball clothing I owned from Reebok. I remember because it was the cheapest one available as well. And I didn't know I3 was his. I watched Iverson play, but the telecast was so few and far that I didn't know that Iverson's brand was I3. So when I actually got to know it after I bought it, I was like jumping up and down in excitement. What a player. It's interesting, right? Post Malone's song also mentions that this guy, that Iverson was bankrupt. So clearly one of those few, if you knew sports and you followed sports, Iverson's case of not having money is one of the biggest ones you'd hear. Just since I mentioned Boris Becker, I'm going to mention one, and this came as a shocker to me when I read about it as time passed, and that was Bjorn Borg. Because he seemed like the more calm demeanor sort of person, seemed to have his head on his shoulders. And then we always spoke about the Borg and McEnroe rivalry. It's what we've heard growing up. We unfortunately didn't get to watch them play, of course, but whatever we've heard, you always thought McEnroe will be that guy. McEnroe's in fact done well in his life. He's gone forward. He's not multiplied his wealth as such, but he's doing well as a commentator, so on and so forth. Borg quit, got into drug addiction, overdosed on drugs as well, attempted suicide, then separated from his wife and several other women later on, tried a clothing line to get his life back on track, failed, then started an underwear line, which only Ronaldo does well in because Krishnan clearly is willing to buy his underwear, and started a dating site, which was pretty interesting. So, trying to get his life back. But what was so shocking is tennis is typically that sophisticated sport. It's a rich man's game or rich woman's game as well, rich person's game, so to speak. So you don't expect that to happen because you'd expect legacy money. They know how to handle it. They've always had it in a way. Yes, not obviously now it's like a 10x, 20x, 30x, probably even more in terms of the values going up. And Bjorn Borg's what a multiple time champion one of those players who everyone has looked up to for years on end, and probably in the future will still look up to in terms of tennis talent. So when you hear that story, I think that one really stood out for me, and I was taken aback by it and quite shocked. But that's the problem with sport, right? It's like sport becomes such a big part of your life. And if you get so attached to it, the moment it goes away from you, your mental state is not normal. Like, because you are trying to fill in that gap and fill in that void, and you have nothing to do because you potentially have not been educated enough, or you don't have the necessary skill sets to do another job. If you try to, let's say, start a business, you don't have the business acumen sometimes necessarily, it might not work even if you start it within your industry. So I mean, so many factors. That's why life skills are so important. And I think that's why, but Bjorn Borg's, that another reason why it just comes as a shocker is because Scandinavians are typically well educated. They have all of that support as well, typically from around them. They have the finances, they have the backing, sometimes even from the governments if they're struggling. So it just seemed very, very shocking to me. And that's what stood out. Now, Gui, I'm going to come back to you. So that's tennis, and we've covered basketball. I'm going to have to come to you with this guy. We love him. He's one of the bad boys in sport. We'll start with the first one, then I'll come to you with the second as well. You're going to go back to back here. First one is the boxer, Mike Tyson. Take it away. You have to mention Mike Tyson. You have to.
I mean, okay, again, he's had a lot of troubles in life, right? And I think it's like kind of augments your financial troubles also, or rather, sometimes I feel like the financial troubles is like an accumulation of everything else, which is what almost appeared to be like in his case. We've all heard the crazy stories. We've all heard the multiple BMW buying stories. We've all, I don't know what animals from which countries this man has, decided to have in his home. So we've probably like hit like the top 5 things on his list, and we don't want to continue further because that's where it gets a little hazy. Like, how do you explain this? But yeah, so Iron Mike, classic case of not having maybe the tools to just encounter everything which comes at you when you are you know plummeted to the top of the very top, right? And now at the top of the mountain, and everything which you encounter is new to you. And let's be honest, like Mazhar, I think you spoke about it, like lacking the expertise, but like for people who have the expertise also, it comes with time. And sports persons generally are made overnight. Like the status when you go from like an average nobody to a god tier sports person is, it's not too long, right? Consider a lot of the athletes like playing lifespan, right? They don't even play for maybe 20 years, right? 20 years is not enough time to master. Okay, they probably have mastery over the one thing they do, right? But it takes up so much of your time. Like, imagine like us in our jobs, are we being able to master a sport? Probably not, right? So to expect it from them is kind of wonky. But then where I believe is something which everyone should do is hire an expert. Do it. Like, I don't understand something, I am not trying to solve the issue by myself, right?
Yeah.
Like the clothing line. Right? So that's what I felt like it was for Mike, right? He was overnight celebrity, overnight. Like, again, it's very rude of me to say overnight. I mean, like, because of course the amount of work which goes into just becoming a pro athlete is crazy. So I don't mean to say that he became an athlete overnight. I mean to say that he became a sensation overnight, and then everything which follows from that is very difficult to always have under your control.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd imagine that the amount of money they make, if they just give it to person who knows how to manage money, like anyone, a fund manager, any financial expert, he won't even lose a percentage of his entire earnings. Like, I was just looking at the numbers for Tyson. $30 million per fight he was earning. $30 million. How do you drain all of that money? No matter what. I mean, you can always spend all your money, but it's so hard. Like, I was struggling that day. I have a 150-pound voucher and I didn't know what to buy with it. And I was like, should I keep it? Should I keep it? Should I keep it? You have 30 million in the bank. When you don't even need to spend it, don't spend it. It's like there's no need. It can sit idle for a bit. No one's even asking you to invest if you don't trust the concept of investment, if you don't trust the banking setups, fair enough. But just leave it lying. It doesn't matter. It's not going to disappear just like that. He made over $300 million in his fighting career through his fights. But he also spent 400,000 pounds a month. On what? Like you said, like those animals and God knows what not. I don't even want to go into that list.
Buying a
like
BMW
you said,
for everyone he knows.
$9 million in legal fees, filed for bankruptcy in 2003, then has an outstanding debt of $27 million apparently. They just can't maintain steady cash flows, and it's crazy. Like, I'm going to come to you again. The one, the only, our favorite moment, our favorite bad boy, may his soul rest in peace, Don Diego Maradona. Take it away, Gui.
What? Don't say things like favorite bad boy. What do you mean?
Come on, man. That story of shooting the air rifle. Come on, man. That's unmatched. For those who don't know, you have to check out our Bad Boys episode. The link is going to be in the description as well as on top as we speak through this episode.
So let's be honest. Nobody needs to detail this man's bad habits, right? Well and truly, like this guy was. When people say that people play football for fun, like this man was there. He was doing just that. Like, it's not just one legendary dribble against England in the World Cup, right? It's over and over again. It just watch his games and don't watch everything which is pre Barcelona. Rather, if you were to personally ask me, watch everything pre Barcelona and you'll see that this man was just playing for fun. He was having so much fun off the field. Also, that it kind of things just kind of didn't work out financially. But here's one very surprising thing which I read, right? The Italian government said that they apparently are owed 32 million pounds. If anyone wants it in dollars, it's close to $50 million.
54 or something. Yep.
Yeah. In unpaid taxes. Wow. Like, talk about a country making you and then taking it all away. This man played his best years at football in Italy, and wow, like owing $50 million. Forget, this man has earned way more. Just imagine how much he must have earned. And then to say that you can't pay those, you don't have money.
I wonder, how did he earn so much back then? You're talking about times back then. Like, if an inflation account for that, imagine if he would have surpassed Ronaldo, and probably at this rate, if he owed 54 million in tax. It's absurd.
God. So there is apparently the figure. Okay, so Maradona refused to pay this amount. Let's and okay, now you want to know, right, why this person is refusing to pay the money? That's probably because he doesn't have any. Because he has a Rolls Royce Ghost or 3 had BMW i8. All right. Uh, a hunt. Okay, fine. Two luxury cars, not bad, right? No. What was horrible is a Hunter Overcomer amphibious vehicle. What is this? What is this? Why do you have this? Don't just avoid. No. But anyway, so his estimated net worth at the time of his death was only $500,000. I say only $500,000, like I will earn that just tomorrow. But even then, for a man of his stature, things such as this coming out post his demise is just like kind of sad, right? Because legendary status. Tendulkar like status in Argentina, not Argentina, like I would say, like in many other parts of the world also, right? Revered as a god amongst those who love football, and this is what it has come down to. Maybe like toning down your life is always a good idea for everyone, not just athletes.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Of course, I think in the case for combat sports, it's very common. Again, concussions has to definitely be that dementia in football. I think they definitely do play a role, and it's something that has to be considered as well. That does have an impact. Again, Maradona went from absolute rags to riches. So it's very hard when you rise, like you said, right? How quickly you rise in sport. Suddenly the money comes in. It takes is one incident, right? And then everyone is with absolutely no discredit to the athletes. Of course, it's incredible to even get there, and it's unimaginable. But I think it's just human nature to succumb to all of this. And I'm going to say something which is so cheesy and cliched, but it's Mahatma Gandhi's line of there's enough in this world for man's need, but not enough for man's greed. And that's exactly what it comes down to, I guess. Okay, we've covered, I think, the biggest, baddest people. Now let's look at some others, Gui. Just looking at some of the smaller sports. So we've covered basketball, of course. We've covered boxing. So I'm going to count that as combat sports. We've covered football with Maradona. We've covered tennis with Becker and Borg. Those are the major sports that we'll talk about. We can't go into F1 because, well, we all know how much money is there. Like you have to be, and also it's never their own money at stake typically. Because then your rich father, Latifi, owns teams, then it doesn't matter, right? You can drive a car like it's your toy and no one can say a word to you. So I read an interesting one, and this was snooker. So he's a snooker legend known as Willie Thorne. He got into gambling addiction. So ended up losing £1 million because of gambling addiction. And that led to depression because then he had no money to pay back. Snooker's not a high paying sport. Let's face it. You're not going to earn £250,000 a week like football players do, or for that matter, even how basketball player contracts are structured. So £1 million is a lot for someone who's a snooker world champion. So he tried committing suicide because of depression, and it's crazy. So it happens even in the smaller sports, and it's so significant. Like no one is immune to this. It can be anyone tomorrow. And it's just, that's why it's so important. And I'm going to just reiterate what I said earlier, to have something else on the side always that you are doing that keeps you going. You can't just have that. And it's very hard, of course, because they say like to be a champion and to be the best ever in your sport and to be the best at that point in time, you have to dedicate everything, your entire life to that game. But I think there are ways to unwind, and I think LeBron James shows that in a lot of ways. Yes, he drinks tequila, which is not the most ideal way to do it. Also, it's another lavish lifestyle that he lives, but he makes time for family. He's diversified. He gives back to society. There are ways to keep yourself engaged. I'm not going to go into some other controversies about his personal life. I think that's for another day. Again, these are alleged things, so that's why I don't want to get into it. Uh, One more GUI that I wanted to highlight before I take this on to you. Marion Jones, the fastest woman in the world at one point in time, won the Olympic gold medal. I think a couple of them, both were stripped of her. All her medals were stripped basically because of doping allegations. And then because of that, she had a court case and then had to pay the lawyers, the legal fees, ended up losing all of her money. In fact, she lost so much money that the bank had to foreclose on her by taking her apartment from her, which was worth $2.5 million. You're talking about an Olympic gold medalist formally, that to a US Olympic medalist, where they anyway have so much money, which gets thrown in, especially if you win an Olympic gold medal. So, like I said, it's no one's immune to it. All the others were male athletes that we mentioned. Clearly, males are worse at handling money than the women. But no one, anyone can fall prey to this. Marion Jones is a perfect example, and her case was worse because it was legal fees. She didn't end up spending it lavishly. It was purely taken out because she was fighting a case, which honestly I think she was never going to win because she did dope. I mean, there was enough proof that she had doped. The substances came about, substance abuse was clear. All of those things were there, but it's just crazy. Now, Gui, I'm going to come to you again. We've spoken about all the negatives. I slightly just mentioned LeBron James. Now let's just quickly run through some of the people who you believe have done an amazing job in building their portfolio, diversifying, multiplying whatever they've earned, and become big businessmen or businesswomen across sport. And it'll be nice if you can just mention a couple of Indian names too, because why not? I mean, at the end of the day, we do take pride in our athletes too. So go ahead.
So like my favorite, like my absolute favorite when it comes to this one is Shaq, right? Like Shaquille O'Neal is probably one of those guys who you would not know is actually like so good with his money, right? And he said this on like multiple occasions. If you watch his interviews, or if you know, like me, are on YouTube a lot, and you'll get these suggestions, right, where he's spoken about how he was blowing his money, how certain people came into his life to advise him otherwise, and since then, how well he has done in terms of keeping that in mind, right? Uh, Maybe I would say that yes, he got lucky in the sense that someone did come into his life to tell him these things, right? That how important it is to maintain your financial investments way into your future, because you know you got to take care of yourself for like 40 years after your career gets over. So this dude owns like 100 plus Five Guys franchises. Like, what do you
Best
what are
milkshakes in the world, Gui. Best milkshakes in the world. I had one yesterday. That's why.
So see, thanks for contributing to Shaq. I'll say it on his behalf. So he has a lot of all these car dealerships. That's another, like these are just like investment which don't go hand in hand, right? Which means they are keeping you afloat for longer, if anything. And again, don't have to be the most outlandish things like having your own fashion brand. You can associate this. Why I really like to mention his name is because he probably doesn't do things which are like super outlandish in the sense of having his own brand or his own line of things or having his own car. Like he's associated with the right people so as to multiply his wealth. That so Shaq, big name when it comes to this. And for, I mean, if you think about all the Indian athletes, one name which will definitely pop up in most people's mind is Mahendra Singh Dhoni. I think like, so again, very much like Shaq, right? He's not the most vocal about these things. I don't think he ever pushed for his own brand of anything, right? much unlike the athletes today who would want, or like, again, don't want to say it in a bad sense, because it is not a bad thing, right? Virat has his own brand with Puma, and he has, what is it called, 18? Is it? Is that how you say it?
18, right? I don't know how you say it, but we yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, it's
Whatever.
one.
So
Yeah, it's basically one is written and then there's an 8. So whatever it is.
which is also like great, right? That athletes are pushing for this form of recognition even amongst Indian athletes. Of course, these are cricketers, and cricketers would be most likely to get this form of recognition in our country. But again, Mahendra Singh Dhoni has a lot of ventures. He has a production house also, if I'm not wrong, and stuff like a small entertainment company. Okay, I was reading about this and I'm like, fine, like that. But these are the things, right? Something which he is not personally invested in terms of time. Like, you don't have to be invested in these things, maybe with your own time. You're finding the right people to run these ventures, much like Shaq, right? Which is why, if you ask me, like, these are the kind of smart investments with not investing time. Okay, you probably investing money and in people who will help you grow.
Good
What do
point.
you think?
Just a few shout outs that I wanted to give before we wrap up the podcast. Vijender Singh, the Indian boxer, amazing job to firstly put India on the map in boxing, then turning pro as well and going and fighting and then winning. So not only putting India on a pedestal, but then again diversifying whatever earnings he had into different things. And also, again, hiring people to do that for him. So hiring financial experts who knew how much money to put in. And at the same time, Vijender was well aware of protecting but his a certain percentage of his money. God forbid anything went wrong. And I think credit where it's due in terms of that. Mary Com has done an amazing job again. I think it's a female thing. I think they are definitely better than us when it comes to financial management. So
Or any form of management, but
any form of
yes.
management. True, good point. So I think MC Mary Com, shout out to her as well in terms of the Indian athletes. Again, a couple of names. It would be a crime. Shubham will never forgive us if we don't do this. Cristiano Ronaldo. Underwear brand, perfect, right? I mean, he's gone with his looks and his fit body, no absolute no fat. He himself advertises it. Did one of the sexiest photo shoots we've ever seen in our lives with, I think it was Alessandra Ambrosio, if I'm not wrong. My God, what would I do to be in Ronaldo's place at that point? But
Or at any point, right?
or at any point, at any point. But yeah, so I think Ronaldo, no doubt, of course, reaching that billionaire figure as well. I think most recently, Conor McGregor. My God, whatever said and done, that guy knows how to make money with his whiskey brand. And the good thing about the whiskey brand was it's important for people to learn when to get out of investments as well. He pulled the plug as soon as he achieved a certain amount of sales. He realized that, okay, it's the perfect time to exit because it's a very competitive market. So he took his chunk, did the advertising, got out of it, sitting on that fat cash and enjoying his life in his Rolls Royce and so on and so forth. So I would say those are the two main names to mention. Just one last thing to end the podcast, one last note. Asamoah Gyan almost took Ghana to the World Cup semi-finals. He was his own criminal in a way. Actually, Suarez is also to be blamed. But the Ghanaian was driving a Rolls Royce around and he had $600 in his bank account. So just think about that. And he also, I don't know how, but he was earning 227,000 per week at Shanghai Football Club. Somehow lost it all. So anyway, that's it from Gui and me. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Hope you took in something from that. Drop your comments on who you believe may have missed, who is noteworthy, so on and so forth. Or if you have any thoughts on who we've spoken about, and maybe even thoughts about why is it that athletes somehow can't manage them funds? What do you think is their mindset behind it? Is it riches just too fast? Until then, we'll be back next week with a new episode. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.
If you like this episode, make sure to leave a like and share it with anyone else who might be interested. You can also subscribe on any social media platform that you prefer, and all our links are in the bio. We also have a website with all our episodes as well as blogs and a whole lot of other sports content, so make sure to check that out as well.